This is a new M4 MacBook Air, and it just got the best value for money update in a while. It's got more RAM and performance for less money. So is this the best time to get into a MacBook Air? But without a chassis update, it is falling behind in some ways. And if you want to do more pro work like editing videos, can the fanless design hold up? Spoilers, the condition, whether it's in the sun, the shade, or even having a small fan blowing on it, can affect the result a lot. Let's take a look at the upgrades first, which doesn't seem like much on the surface. However, most of the interesting upgrades are things that you cannot see. But starting with a few things that you can see, like this new blue color, it looks great. And the keycap coating. You won't even notice that it's changed without having an older Mac side by side, but it's surprisingly beneficial. The new coating feels a bit rougher and seems to reject oil much better. I've noticed that it does make the keyboard look cleaner for longer. And now for the internal changes that you cannot see, starting with speccing this laptop. I've always been a big proponent of upgrading to 16 gigs of RAM for previous MacBook Airs, because when you only have 8 gigs of RAM, that's the most common cause for all sorts of slowdowns. But now the M4 MacBook Air by default starts at 16 gigs of RAM, and the starting price even went down compared to previous years. So now you can get a 16GB RAM M4 MacBook Air for under $1,000. However, don't do that just yet, especially if you need more storage, because the storage upgrade is actually really good value. When you upgrade to 512GB of storage, you also get the $100 processor upgrade for free, and not only that, you can choose the 70-watt charger for free as well. I would definitely go for that one because you'll be able to charge the MacBook at twice the speed. Besides that, the M4 also has a new display engine that allows you to use 2 external displays while keeping the internal display running as well. Leave a comment if you actually would use 3 screens like that. And the M4 is also a bit more efficient, but it's not a huge difference in my testing. Compared to the M2 MacBook Air, it lasted around 15% longer when looping some gaming benchmarks, which also simulates any sort of more intense workloads. And when watching a video, it also lasted around 12.5% longer. That's some pretty cool gains, but it's not really a game changer because all of the Apple Silicon MacBooks already last very long. And macOS is fairly efficient and well optimized for Apple Silicon. There's not really any background tasks that constantly drain the battery. So these MacBooks seem to be able to just sit there forever and be ready to go at any time. Plus, since Apple switched their entire computer lineup to Apple Silicon, there's not really any ARM compatibility worries on macOS anymore. Basically, every software runs perfectly nowadays. And now more about the chassis. Although it didn't really physically change, it's still a great chassis that's very thin and light with great rigidity all around. And you can open the lid easily and smoothly with just one finger. Also, just like all of the MacBook Airs before it, this one is extremely quiet because, well, it's literally fanless and cannot make any noise. I have noticed that it doesn't run that hot most of the time. It's cool to the touch and the palm rest doesn't really heat up even under heavy loads. However, this chassis is now 3 years old and it is falling behind in some pretty noticeable ways against Windows laptops. For example, the screen is still a 500 nits LCD display at 60 Hz. It's solid and it looks fine, but it's no match for a high refresh rate OLED screen. And the MacBook Air has a decent anti-reflection coating, but Apple's nano texture coating is much nicer in most environments, and you still cannot get that on the MacBook Air. The second biggest flaw of this chassis design is that they've tucked the speakers inside here and they're firing into the hinge. So it's bouncing the sound off of the screen and there's also basically no bass. It just doesn't sound very good. MacBooks used to have one of the best speakers in a laptop, and in fact, the MacBook Pro still does, but the current MacBook Air isn't in the same league. Just take a listen. Please bring back the side speakers on the M1 MacBook Air. And the last downside about this chassis is that it only has 2 USB-C ports and they're on the same side. These ports are Thunderbolt 4 and really fast. But if you ever want to mount it to the right of a monitor, then the cable will inevitably be in front of the monitor, or you'll have to leave a gap. It's kind of annoying. One port on each side will be so much more convenient. And the last thing it's missing is Wi-Fi 7. The latest iPhones all got Wi-Fi 7, and it could be a pretty big leap in terms of performance, especially in more populated areas. So it's just kind of weird that this brand new laptop doesn't have it. But aside from those drawbacks, the most impressive aspect of the M4 MacBook Air is the performance. It's ridiculously fast. fast. However, for more mundane day-to-day tasks, it feels almost the exact same as this M2 MacBook Air. They're both very snappy and open almost everything instantly. And it's the same if you turn on the low power mode. There's still enough performance to basically go through all of the mundane daily tasks with ease, and you'll have a ridiculous amount of battery life in return. But still, the performance gain on paper is pretty insane. They somehow made it over 20% faster than the M3 in both single and multi-core performance. Plus, the GPU is 7% faster as well. That's a pretty huge generational gain, which begs the question, can the Air now replace the MacBook Pro and do things like editing? Well, since it's fanless, it very much depends on the ambient condition. The numbers above are all done in a 75 Fahrenheit room in the shade, and in this condition, just editing some 4K footage with some effects doesn't cause it to thermal throttle at all. So as long as you have enough RAM, the M4 MacBook Air is very snappy and it feels just as good as my M3 Max MacBook Pro in most cases. But the rendering speed is obviously no match. And if you look at this 20-minute gaming benchmark loop, the performance does decrease as the MacBook Air heats up more, so it could take a bit longer to render longer videos. However, even when the M4 MacBook Air is thermal throttling, it's still faster than the M2 MacBook Air under optimal conditions. Plus, if you put a little fan to it, you can almost prevent thermal throttling altogether. So for the typical social media video editor, is the MacBook Pro pointless then? Well, not quite, because since the Air can only dissipate heat by radiating it away slowly through its chassis, in the hotter environment, it can really struggle. Here's another run of the same gaming benchmark loop, but now the MacBook Air is under direct sunlight. You can see it slow down more and much quicker, and this is still in a 75 Fahrenheit AC room. So it can very much be worse if you're in a hotter room or if you're outside. Plus, the MacBook Pro is still just the nicer computer in most ways. It has one of the best screens on a laptop ever at 1600 nits, and it has great local dimming with its mini LED. It's also high refresh rate, and after trying out the nano texture more, I would definitely get it on my next MacBook. Aside from the screen, the MacBook Pro can last even longer and has probably the best laptop speaker there is, but those are mostly nice to haves, and the Air can get most things done just fine. Overall, this is one of the best updates for a MacBook Air recently. It's hard to beat the price to performance ratio. It's probably not worth upgrading from an M2, but anything older, I think you'll be surprised by how much more capable this is. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, remember to give it a like and subscribe for more videos.